What's going on, guys, folks, ladies, girls, and other pronounded people? Pronouns, whatever. Pronimals. Interesting day today. We already acquired a six-legged tarantula that I guess something, maybe a lizard, bit a couple of his legs off, and so he. It was funny because we had this one big tarantula that was living in the kitchen, and I was stoked because we're in the jungle. The house is open, so there's like giant jungle cockroaches in the house sometimes, and just all sorts of undesirable creatures. I don't mind the tree frogs so much. It is a little weird when you're walking across the kitchen and a frog slaps and sticks to your face. Um, it's just something you don't expect. Uh, but it happens here. So we had this six-legged tarantula, uh, and it gets lint. Oh well, no, actually, what I was saying is we had this big tarantula, and it one day I saw it walk out the front door and head off into the hills. So it just moved out, like it just left one day. And so I was like, man, we need another tarantula because it eats all of the stuff in the house. And so uh, like 2 days later, there's this other tarantula, but it's missing legs. And so, yeah, I think it was freshly wounded when we first found it. And so it was moving very slowly and just kind of dragging around the floor. So every day I've had to kind of hold it down and pull all the lint off of its legs so it can move because, all the fuzz balls and stuff will get it all stuck together. I guess it has trouble I don't know, but whatever. So we have this six-legged tarantula. And then today, well, it started last night actually, a full-grown bat. They're crevice bats, so they live like between stuff, not hanging in trees, but between crevices. And so the boards, I started to do my vocal warm-ups, and this bat flew out and shit right in my face. It flew right at my face, and maybe realizing that it was flying directly into the mouth of a large mammal, provoked it to shit. So it kind of swooped up and shit on my cheek. Um, and so then today I'm in the front yard, and my son found this little tiny baby bat with a broken wing. So we've been nursing it back to health with Enrica's breast milk, and it's moving around. It seems like it's probably gonna live. Um, Shit, man! I just grabbed some crazy ass bug. Speaking of insects, so every once in a while I like to pop on and do these sort of AMAs, and also I answer some questions. Like I have my unanswered comments, or comments that I haven't responded to in my analytics, and so I'll go through there, and rather than typing out the answers, I'll start these AMAs with by addressing some of those questions. Um, Man, but the first thing I wanted to do was mention something I left out of last night's live stream that I thought was important, and it's the main reason I got on tonight, and I cannot remember what the hell it was. Um, but along those same lines, um, Fernando, one of our longtime supporters in our goddamn insects, dude. It's a little bit late to be doing this outside in the jungle right now. Um, Longtime supporters pointed out to me that, well, let me back this up a little bit. So, yesterday in our live stream, I was talking about the three veils of negative existence in Jewish mysticism and the Kabbalistic system. So these three veils are like there's an absolute nothingness, which in some interpretations, including that of the 33rd degree Freemason Albert Pike in his book Morals and Dogma, consider the nothingness at the absolute center of the universe to be the deity. That's the creator, because it's this like the ultimate paradox is the ultimate truth. That's where all of this kind of leads us. And so the three veils of negative existence are sort of like there's, you know, a nothingness that is so nothing that that is doesn't even apply, is how one rabbi described it. And then after that, there is a second layer of nothingness that is less nothing than this other nothing. And then there's a third layer that's even less nothing than the other nothing, but it's still basically nothing. And then beyond that is the realm of emanation where we exist. And so I was thinking about quantum loop theory and my own visions from many, many years ago when I was in my early 20s, probably well before quantum loop theory ever existed. Um, and I had this idea that the universe, the phoenix, you know, that it collapses um, after it. So the nothingness realizes it's there, and it has that thought, that vibration, the logos rushes forth, right? A hey, I am. Um, and so that begins the process of replication and reflection that leads to the complexity and the sophistication and the gigantic ass universe that we live in. And there is a point where it expands to its greatest, it can't expand anymore. And the reason is that all of the potential experiences or relations have been exhausted, and at that point the light begins to consume itself and it collapses back into the singularity. And then when it reaches a certain density, that causes the explosion that we know of as the Big Bang, and it starts over again. Um, and so I was mentioning this in the last live stream, and afterwards I saw that Fernando had commented that yogis actually, you know, there's 7 layers of this existence, and the bottom 4 are destroyed every time, but then these 3 retain some information. Um, and that's what's preserved. The way he put it is that, you know, the information that's vibrating high enough is preserved, and then when the thing recreates, that information informs the next cycle, right? Because the way that I originally envisioned it, and I think that the way that quantum loop theory is describing it, is that it's almost exactly the same every time, because what you would have is the exact same conditions, right? Because it's the same thing happening according to the deterministic, you know, processes of quantum physics. And so, you know, once it returns to that little energetic speck, the conditions are exactly the same every time, which is actually a nightmarish scenario, because it implies that every time the universe recycles, that we just live the same life over and over, doomed to repetition. We're not really reincarnated as different people, if this theory is accurate, but as the same person over and over and over and over for all of infinity. It's literally, in a certain sense, hell, unless you happen to be, say, Bob Weir from the Grateful Dead, or Maynard James Keenan from Tool, or someone that has this awesome life from the time that they're very young. Um, you know, if you were lucky enough to be one of those people, then you're not really going to mind so much getting constantly recycled as the same individual. But I like to think that there is some variation in these cycles. And so that idea, I was like, how could that be though? And then it occurred to me that perhaps those 3 veils of nothingness that aren't quite total nothingness retain some information. And then, you know, Fernando said, well, that's actually already what the yogis think. And another thing I mentioned in that live stream last night is that when we find these ideas that are present in disparate systems that are not connected, that there's a good chance that there's something to it. So that was kind of nice to discover. I had either forgotten or never read that about the yogis and their belief that some of this information in the top 3 layers is retained. So that was a cool thing to stumble upon. By the way, you guys, feel free to ask stuff in the chat. I'm really trying to recall why it is that I decided to pop on tonight in the first place. A little bit chaotic. I've really dived back into music, and I've been just studying vocal fry and vocal compression and composition and new scales and all of this stuff for hours and hours and hours. And editing also my mystery school video, which will be up in the next couple of days. So don't miss that. I did put in the title that I would talk about world affairs a little bit. And then I started thinking about it, and I realized that the particular subject that I wanted to talk about could get me potentially deleted. So I don't know that I am going to get into too much detail about that. I just will mention while I'm thinking about it that a lot of the deceptions, at the very least mistakes, if we want to be less paranoid about it, over, since 2020, and more stuff is coming out in the mainstream news, I've noticed over the last few weeks, that really establishes a firm foundation for the necessity of apologies from a lot of people in regards to a lot of stuff that I got called a lot of names for saying. So, by the way, you guys that are just jumping on, feel free to pop questions in the chat. You got to give me a second to get to them because I have a lag, a pretty bad lag, so it takes me a second to get the. So yeah, that whole thing about the yogis and the three veils of negative existence is really interesting to me. Fairies, real or imagined? Man, that is a tough thing. I will tell you a story. This is one of the craziest things that ever happened to me in my entire life. I've had a number of experiences that suggest that there are some sort of disincarnate intelligences that we share the earth with. Speaking of, ubiquitous ideas that exist in different parts of the world that lack communication, the idea that there are little spirit world beings of some kind running around, it's found in a lot of different places, but that's not really that meaningful. To just draw meaning from that alone, I was thinking about this earlier today, is kind of like when people, see old paintings or hear old stories about giants on Earth, and they go, okay, well, that's proof that there were giants back in the day. And that's kind of like people in the future finding movie posters from now and saying, oh, wow, there must have been vampires and werewolves and shit back in, back in the 1900s or 2000, whatever it is. You know what I mean? It's just a bit ridiculous. But it is interesting. And so once upon a time, I was on the West Coast. This was probably 20 years ago now. And in certain parts of Northern California and Southwestern Oregon, there is a very, there's a lot of people believe that there's gnomes in the redwoods, like actual gnomes. And you'll drive through towns that will have like gnome crossing signs. And, people have lots of weird stories. And I mean, you have to try to balance being open-minded with also knowing that this is the West Coast. Like, these people have been high as hell for decades. There's all the Looney Tunes and what was it about? What does California have in common with a Ford cars? There's a wing nut on every corner or something like. You know what I mean? Like, it's what is California and a box of cereal have in common? They're full of nuts and flakes. You know what I mean? So you just kind of like take everything with a grain of salt. But one night, my then wife and I were driving down the road late, and we needed a place to sleep. And I remember it was foggy, and we had already driven way up what was probably a pot farming road, and we may have gotten ourselves shot. Like, we really didn't know how things were out there, so it's a miracle that we didn't run into any trouble. But I remember driving up this super steep, shrouded in mist, listening to this really dark, evil Space Jam from 8/21/93, Autzen Stadium, great Grateful Dead show. But really, really dark for the Dead, and it was so spooky. And at some point, maybe I had a premonition that maybe we shouldn't go any further, and I was like, you know what, I'm not driving up. Plus, we were in this Ford Taurus or something that shouldn't have been climbing this mountain. And so I was like, let's go back down. And so we go down and we see a road on the right, and we turn down the road, and there's another road. So I turn down that, and it's a driveway, and it's a campground. So we drive back to this trailer, knock on the door, and this little tiny lady answers the door. I mean, she was all of 4'6", maybe, really, really tiny and super weird. She said, "How can I help you?" And my wife and I both saw this. We asked each other as soon as we got into the tent, "Did you see that shit she did with her eyes?" She looked at us both like I was standing here, and she used, you know, one eye each to lock eyes with each of us, and like, her laugh was just super unsettling and otherworldly. And you know, we'd been seeing these gnome signs all day, and it occurred to me while this exchange was going on, like, man, there's something is weird about this. So she's like, "Oh yeah, well, here's your campsite." And we go to the campsite, and we go to sleep, and we wake up, and there are the biggest blackberries I've ever seen, which is not uncommon in Oregon. There are giant blackberries all over the place. Absolutely amazing, delicious blackberries. But so we wake up, we stuff our face with blackberries, and we get in the car, and we drive out of the campground, and I turn right, which is the wrong way. So we go down to the end of the road, and it's a dead end. And I was like, oh yeah, the highway was to the left. So we turn around to go back, and we get to the highway, and I said, did you see that campground we stayed at last night? And my wife's like, "No, I didn't." So I turned around, because it was only like a quarter mile from the highway to the end of the road. There's no other roads, and there's fucking nothing there. There was nothing there. There was no driveway. There was no campground. There was nothing there. So I'm not saying that woman was a gnome necessarily, but I don't know what happened there. And you know, it was so mind-bogglingly weird that I drove back and forth, and you know, there's no possibility that anything else happened, because I came out of the driveway, made a right, went a very short distance, dead end, turned around, back to the highway, very short distance, nowhere else to go. And the highway was where it should be, you know? So, well, that's the thing. We slept in a campground, but it just wasn't there the next day. So, you know, I mean, I don't know what to say about that, but it does seem kind of reminiscent of these stories of like contact with these otherworldly little beings, you know. Just really weird, unexplainable stuff happens that doesn't necessarily just involve these weird little creatures. I think, you know, another potential explanation. I mean, there's a lot of different possibilities. You know, interdimensional beings of some type. Temporarily, a filter in our brains goes down, and we're able to perceive more of the universe. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, I guess I don't really know. And the thing is, like, what does real mean, anyways? If I perceive something, that doesn't mean it's actually there. So, you know, I guess another thing that's worthy of mentioning here, though, is that it is said that if you know someone that doesn't believe in magic, and you want to prove that it's real, all you have to do is an Enochian call properly pronounced, and you will know right away that these beings exist, that the Enochian calls actually do make contact with some other type of consciousness. The thing is, it is also said that it is dangerous. Wow, that is a weird bug on my light right now. Man, I wish you guys could see this thing. I'm scared to pick it up because I don't know if it'll bite. But it's like all antennas and legs and this tiny, tiny, tiny little body. Maybe actually it's not scary, I guess. I can... There, can you guys see that? Speaking of... Let's see, where would I have to hold my hand? I guess there? Or here? Yeah, you guys see that thing? Isn't that trippy? Anyways, what the hell is that? What is it? That's like the craziest thing about being in the Amazon is the constant like insects that you've never seen before, like all just constantly. By the way, you guys, if you're interested in our retreats, we're almost full for October, and that's our last month. We're going to be done for the year, probably until the next year when I go to California. So if you want to come to Miss Hawaii, this is basically last call. My light just went out because yeah, like I said, we have September, we have a few openings, and then October, and then we're done. So if you're interested in ritual magic, hermetic ritual magic, and ayahuasca, changa, different types of plant medicine, we have various shamans that we take people to locally, mostly Quechua. There's the possibility of traveling to Shuar territory to drink with Miguel Chiriop, who's a very well-known Shuar. That actually, you have to pay for your travel. It's 9 hours away. It's not too much. Travel and lodging, if you choose to do that, it's like optional. And then we have all kinds of outdoor excursions that we do, and learning about just the medicinal plants, so not necessarily just psychoactive, and what you can eat in the jungle and all that sort of stuff. So you can email me, the email's in the description. Also, please hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon. You can make one-time contributions to Zelle or PayPal or Cash App, cryptocurrency, all possibilities to support the channel. I figured out today that in order for to really justify my time, this channel would have to make 10 times as much as it does. So I'm considering what to do about that, like if I'm going to continue or if I'm just going to start posting a lot less, or if suddenly we start getting a lot more support. But yeah, it's really tough being deprioritized. It's hard for us to do anything. And speaking of world affairs, the way that they have engineered the algorithms for Google, we have discovered you are deprioritized across platforms. They know what devices are close to devices that they have deprioritized for censorship purposes. And if you try to switch, like I tried to start another channel, they know that it's the same computer, and therefore that channel is also deprioritized. Your phones are deprioritized. So in order for me to get around this demonetization, I would actually have to get rid of my computer, get rid of my phone, change our bank account, and completely, you know what I mean? Like I would have to come up with like basically a totally fake identity that is in no way connected to myself or my partner. Facebook even has told us that we're not allowed to advertise because we have posted things, and this is the craziest part, that have turned out to be true. What's going on, Misty? Again, you guys, if you have any questions, I am here for you to pick my brain. I probably won't be on for too long because I'm really planning to stay up late and drink. I mean, drinking my tea, but to continue working on music. Let's see, plant medicine. Somebody did post an interesting question somewhere that I didn't respond to, and I'm trying to recall. You know, you think I'd be a little bit better organized. You know, I think it was actually very similar to your fairy question, and I get this question a lot. and I don't think anyone can answer it. You know, even a lot of the shamans, the indigenous people that I've talked to, don't really uh, necessarily have a concrete answer regarding this themselves. And I don't think that anyone should even make pretenses to knowing this sort of thing, because you really can't. And it is that whether or not these ayahuasca beings and DMT beings are actually objectively real. And you know, this is something I've talked about in a lot of the live streams. And you know, I don't necessarily know exactly what that even means, that question. But I think that the best way for us to think about it is that there is a universal mind, and that our illusion of having a singular vantage point from which to view the universe is illusory and temporary, and these compounds just suspend our sense of separateness temporarily. And this is why people get overwhelmed when they take too strong of a dose for their uh, psychological, emotional constitution. Um, but yeah, so I think that it's, as Robert Anton Wilson once said, these beings are real, but they're not real in the same way that the IRS is real, right? They don't really have the ability to come and arrest you, or you know, to even have like poltergeist type phenomena. You know, they are uh, projections of perhaps a greater mind than the individual human, because man, do they seem sophisticated in their intelligence. And also, you know, when I drink ayahuasca, when I realize that it's working, it's not because I physically feel different necessarily, or because the visions have started. I first become aware of this sense that there's a presence, some sort of very ancient and powerful presence. And you know, I that is a subjective experience, but I think that it's worth noting, um, that it does definitely feel like you're suddenly in the presence of something very ancient and something much bigger than human. Yeah, actually, I don't know necessarily what you mean by audio artifacts, but it sounds like you're talking about synesthesia. I actually was reading a really interesting interview conducted by Maynard James Keenan, the singer from Tool, interviewing Jody, what's her name? Joni Mitchell. Joni Mitchell. And hell no, the presence isn't Jesus. Jesus was never real. Jesus was created by the Roman consulate. Definitely not Jesus. It's definitely not Jesus. Jesus never existed. Jesus a is part of a psyop that was designed to control Palestinians in the beginning, and other people. Any institutionalized religion is a weapon, basically, against people. But anyways, the synesthesia is can be caused by genius, I think, and that's also an interesting point, because I think when you um, remove the filters that you know, I was talking about how these compounds suspend the filters that connect us with the greater mind, um, or that disconnect us from the greater mind, so we become connected with it again, right? The goal of the mystery schools or the Western occult tradition is to make contact with your holy guardian angel or your higher self, basically your genius or the genius. I've often thought that genius is not something that someone organically or biologically generates in their brain. It is a connection to something else. It's about getting outside of yourself and transcending the limitations of the individual ego and connecting with this greater thing. Um, and so the individualization of the expressions of that genius come from being filtered through the individual. Um, But I think it's interesting that geniuses like Joni Mitchell see synesthesia, or they experience synesthesia as a normal part of their lives. I do to some extent, but Joni Mitchell is also a trained painter, but she sees tones and musical tones and musical relationships in the same way as a palette of colors. And there are certain elements of that are pretty universal. That when people have synesthesia, certain tones are always a certain color, and certain smells are always a certain color. So synesthesia, by the way, in case I didn't say that, this is the mixing of senses. So you can taste colors or you can see sound. The Grateful Dead actually said that the way that they were able to play these to play these extraordinarily, at times, coherent improvisations was that they were playing to their hallucinations. So they're looking at these geometries because they're tripping balls on acid, shifting geometries and tunnels of kaleidoscopic colors, and they're the seven of them, or six. Let's see, two drummers, keyboards, two guitars, bass, six people are watching these shapes respond to the music, and that's how they're maintaining their cohesiveness. So there's an insinuation there also that the synesthesia is not really an illusion, because you have a group of people that are able to get the same information by using sound to interact with a visual field, right? That's how the Grateful Dead said that they learned to do those early improvisations. But so yeah, I think I made that point about how the experience of suspending the individual consciousness, making contact with this greater genius, whether it's a natural genius or someone that's taken mescaline, the synesthesia occurs. And I think that what these things are really symptomatic of is contact with the universal mind, if that makes sense. If there's a God of life, is there a God of death? I don't really know that I believe in God exactly. I can't imagine that the universe was actually the product of totally random chance. Of course, there's a chicken and the egg sort of problem, and so if one is to say that the universe couldn't be the product of random chance, and assuming that you're coming from the position also that it had a beginning, then you're also implying that the organizing principle, which would be this consciousness, had to have self-organized, which you're also saying is impossible. So you really have a metaphysical problem when you're talking about the necessity for a creator who would himself or itself be uncreated. However, I do think that we can kind of get around that, and I am of the opinion that the universe started out very simply, and I think that is supported by our investigations into the mechanisms of the deterministic reality in the subatomic world. Um, So, if we had only a very simple wave to begin with, and that wave was able to have one relationship that resulted in one interaction that created a third thing, and now we have this, triangle that's able to interact with another triangle, and now we have more lines that are, what I mean? More interactions are possible, and so this complexity builds upon complexity, and the way that the great mystics have always described it is that it's reflections. So, we have this one thing doing something, and then we have a reflection of it that represents an antinomy doing the identical thing, but in reverse polarity. And so this extremely simple wave then becomes, a three-dimensional form, and so on and so forth. And so I think that the consciousness that we have it's very possible that there was no God in the beginning that had an advanced consciousness, that the consciousness is something that developed with the universe. In fact, it makes a hell of a lot more sense to me. What's going on, Christian Cruz? It's been a while. It makes a lot more sense to me that there is a point to the process. So the development of the consciousness of God is the point. That's why it's doing what it's doing. Um, and it also kind of implies that there is nothing that is omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent exactly, because we have not reached that point in the evolution of the universe yet. Uh, and so this is another reason why I always warn against, as the practice of shamanism and the consumption of ayahuasca and similar compounds increases, and even just the pursuit of spirituality through pranayama and yoga, you're going to have more and more and more and more people that are developing or hoping to develop or believing that they have developed more advanced access to more advanced capacities of consciousness. The problem there is that we also have not totally outgrown or escaped from the shadow of superstition and the historical delusions of the old world paradigm, old paradigm religions. And so when people hear a voice in their head that is consistently correct a few times, I think it's very easy to start believing that every voice in your head has authority. So I think this viewpoint that I have that that God, as it was described in the old world religions, doesn't exist yet. That it's something that is realizing itself through the process of creation. That sort of is a safeguard against giving voices in your head authority over your conduct, because that's extremely dangerous. And when people ask me, are the DMT entities real? Are spirits real? Is there a God? Um, I One of the reasons that I'm hesitant to answer in the affirmative is that I don't want to encourage people to put these beings on a pedestal and to believe that anything that they tell them, for example, is correct. Although I should mention, I have never once received negative or harmful instructions from any of these beings. I have had sort of dark experiences, but never once has a DMT entity or an ayahuasca or any of these spirits or apparent spirits from these realms never told me to hurt anyone or myself or to do anything stupid. So that's really interesting. And you don't really hear anything about that either. So, but at any rate, we don't necessarily want to give them authority over us. And I think the best way of looking at it is it's part of a mind. And even though it may be a greater than human mind, more expansive than human, it has access to more information, it's not necessarily infallible. And so with that knowledge, we know that we should question it just as much as we question ourselves. I think that's really healthy and sort of essential to safely, traversing this sort of interdimensional terrain. Anybody else have any past life regression? I think that going to a past life regressionist and paying them to regress you is complete scam. I'm not saying that there's no one that could look into someone and see that sort of thing. People have done it to me many, many, many times, assuming that this person is true. But random people on the street, which is actually the most compelling. People that know me may pick up on things, right? The other thing to consider, though, is that there can be feedback loops between yourself and other people. So if you have something anywhere in your mind, the possibility that some random person could pick it up and seem to be, giving you information when they're actually just picking up your thoughts and speaking them back to you. It actually, in fact, there are homeless people in Santa Cruz that do that as a hustle. They explained to me that's exactly how it works. That they'll have a few beers in order to clear their head, and then they'll just walk up to someone and get on a feedback loop with them. And oftentimes they end up getting taken back to some rich person's house and taken care of uh, for months or whatever, because the person's like, "Oh my God, you're a guru," or whatever. So they actually use this as like their hustle. Um, so even if someone is able to access your deepest thoughts, it doesn't necessarily mean they're true. So, truth is sketchy business if you're really trying to nail it down. And I've talked many times about, past life stuff and why it is impossible to come to an actual conclusion regarding past lives. There could be a repository of information that you're able to access from time to time. It could be that quantum loop theory is real, and so all the information that you encountered last time we went through this cycle, you're just remembering it. So when you have these memories of a past life, and then you learn, as I did, that these were actually experiences in someone else's life, that it's accurate information, it still doesn't mean that you were actually the reincarnation of that person. So, I think it's interesting to consider all of these possibilities, and all avenues are worthy of investigation. But the reality is that you're never going to get any further than the forked tongue of a serpent, right? It's that when you get to the end of the sort of metaphysical conceptualization trail, it's going to fork into two possibilities, and it's going to end, and you're not going to get any further. And you know, that also could have a lot of meanings. The fact that the universe seems to be the interplay of opposites, right? That fact that all of these metaphysical questions seem to why isn't it just you can't write this stuff. But all these metaphysical questions end in a why, just like the antinomies. um, and so maybe both answers are correct somehow. But I don't know if that helps with your past life regression question. Um, because again, I've had remarkable experiences in terms of, you know, knowing things that I couldn't possibly know, that I was able to verify, and even talking to another person that I realized was another character in this other life, and he was able to answer questions only that person would know. I'm still not convinced, and I think that is really the only sane approach to metaphysical process, is that you always have to leave yourself in a state of maybe, and you have to be able to live with it. And it's a very difficult thing for a lot of people to do. There's a really great documentary called Maybe Logic about Robert Anton Wilson, who is one of my favorite people that ever lived. He was a good friend of Timothy Leary, and people talk a lot of shit about Leary, but I think the fact that Robert Anton Wilson was unarguably one of the most advanced geniuses that has ever lived, and he held Leary in such high regard, uh, really speaks volumes about the authenticity of Leary's own genius. Just putting that out there, because a lot of people really do seem to think that Leary was a total fraud, and that's absolutely just nonsense. He was one of the most articulate and profound. Um, I don't want to call him, like, a prophet of the new consciousness, but essentially that's what he was. And yeah, by the way, while we're talking about Robert Anton Wilson, you can do yourself no greater favor than reading the Illuminatis Trilogy, which was his masterpiece that was co-written with Robert Shea. It is the first 100 pages are just gobbledygook, and you're just going like, why the hell am I even still reading this? But if you stick with it, about 100 pages in, suddenly retrospectively, all that shit will snap into place. And life does that a lot, which is profoundly interesting. Um, but yeah, so Illuminatis Trilogy by Robert Anton Wilson is Tim Leary, speaking of Leary, said that it was the most important book ever written. I think that that's probably true. And to give you an idea of why, not only is it was written in 1974, I believe, published in 1974. Um, well, it doesn't matter what anyone sees, or it, you're anything that happens in your mind is still just subjective experience. It's not. It doesn't mean it's actual memory. I don't know if that's what. I don't know who you mean. Her mentor in the Golden Dawn. Actually, this book that I'm speaking about is the first place that I heard about the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. That I ended up taking initiation in eventually. But this book, Illuminatis Trilogy, written in 1974, talks about black flag attacks, that the United States government would attack its own buildings and use those attacks to justify restricting freedom. And basically, the Patriot Act and the events that lead up to the Patriot Act were described in vivid detail in this book, much of which was assembled by writing it, cutting the pieces up, throwing them into a hat, and then pulling them out of the hat high on LSD and putting the book together. And when you realize that it was constructed that way, not the entire narrative, of course, but it shifts from inside of one character's head to another scene in the past and into a scene in the future, but in such a way that is, you just have to read it. But that's how they wrote it. They actually cut it up, threw it in a hat, took the pieces out, pasted them back together. And at one point, they predict that there is a pyramid at the bottom of the deepest part of the ocean. A pyramid at the deepest part of the ocean. And in 2003, right before Robert Anton Wilson's death, they found a pyramid in exactly the spot where it is in the book. And so, given that this is basically a book about the Illuminati, people are like, okay, so Robert Anton Wilson was an insider, or he peered somehow into the universal mind. I mean, you know how big the ocean is? The chances of giving coordinates and then actually finding the pyramid there. And he was still alive when the pyramid was located. So you can actually find interviews with Robert Anton Wilson on YouTube, or one interview where he's almost dead. You can tell he's gray, and he's like, towards the end of his life, he was suffering from polio that he caught 50 years ago, and it comes back sometimes when you're old. And so he was in tremendous pain and just stoned as hell all the time. He would eat tons of brownies. And so they asked him, what do you think of this pyramid being found exactly where it was in your book at the bottom of the ocean in 1974? He just kind of shrugs it off like, it's just a massive coincidence. Another interesting thing about Robert Anton Wilson is that the first book that he wrote that made him famous was called Cosmic Trigger. And it was Cosmic Trigger, the Final Secret of the Illuminati. And the narrative was basically, and this is real, or it's not fiction, like he had this experience where he believed that an alien from Sirius was communicating with him telepathically, and it gave him all this crazy ass information, and he wrote this book, Cosmic Secret, or Cosmic Trigger, Final Secret of the Illuminati. Shortly after it was published, one of his daughters was walking home from school, and she was beaten to death. And after that daughter was beaten to death, the Illuminatis Trilogy is absolutely awesome. By the way, you guys, hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon. You can join our secret streams, which have been off the charts lately, I think, in terms of their value. And you can make one-time contributions on Zelle, PayPal, Cash App, and cryptocurrency, we're demonetized, so we are entirely dependent upon our community for support. And I did spend about 6 hours today editing a video, and I still am not finished. So believe me when I tell you that plenty of work goes into this. What was I talking? Okay, Cosmic Trigger. So his daughter's beaten to death, and I wondered if, because he changed his story after that and said, you know, I didn't actually communicate with an alien from Sirius. I went insane, and you know, the thing is, if you go and read Cosmic Trigger, it does not seem like the ravings of a disordered mind at all. Like someone that's so crazy that they're, you know, hallucinating this telepathic communication with an alien. He wrote it while it was happening, and he seems totally lucid and coherent. So, I mean, granted, you know, there's an editor involved and whatnot. Also, I had an experience where I was not aware that I was receiving information from an alien from Sirius, but I had this vision of this being, and then I never knew what it was. And then one day on ayahuasca, that being was standing in front of me, and Pachamama, the ayahuasca voice narrator, basically, said, remember this? And I was like, of course. And she said, would you like to know what it is? And I said, of course. And she said, well, it's you. And in the same way that one object can appear in two places, right? They do this in laboratories in physics. It's not two objects that are the same thing. It's the same object in two places. You know, she said, so you know how that is, and so the human soul can be the same. And so this other being here is you, as you exist on a gas giant near Sirius A and Sirius B that didn't become a red dwarf star because of the gravitational influence of the other two stars. And so it would have been, what is the word, tertiary or trinary, I don't know, three. But you know, it's binary, and so you transmit information to members of the mineral kingdom, plant kingdom, humans, whatever. You know, you're like a teacher from this gas giant in Sirius. And I was like, wow, that's completely nuts. So, you know, like I said, I don't necessarily believe the things that ayahuasca tells me. Actually, at this point in my life, I more or less do, because they always turn out to be true. So 10 days later, it occurred to me to check online and see if this information I had received about Sirius was actually true. And a few days before, after the ayahuasca ceremony, a paper had been publishing describing how they had suspected, because of the wobble on Sirius B, that there was a third body, but they had confirmed that there was a gas giant that was causing the wobble, that they think didn't become a red dwarf because of the gravitational influence of the other stars. And here's the thing, I'm not an astrophysicist. I wouldn't fucking know that. You know what I mean? So that really hit me like, wow, that's, you know, and I thought it was interesting that it's the same star system that Robert Anton Wilson was claiming that he received these transmissions during Cosmic Trigger. Of course, you know, I was aware of Robert Anton Wilson and these transmissions from Sirius, but then to make matters even weirder, a few days after I discovered that the astrophysics of this scenario were real and true, I discovered that Alice Bailey, a student of Helena Blavatsky, in one of her books had written about how there are these beings on a planet near Sirius B that transmit, I mean, exactly the description that was given to me by ayahuasca, I found exactly in the writings of Alice Bailey. And I have two witnesses to this entire episode, because there were two girls with me. One of them is Enrica, who's probably inside listening right now. And this other girl that was a friend of ours that came, because when I went into the teepee that night, I told the story of what had happened outside with Sirius B and the, you know, this whole thing. So one of the girls was there when I looked up I was like, hey, I should look this up, you know? And Enrica was there when I looked up the Alice Bailey thing. She had heard all this stuff. So, you know, there's no possibility that was all some delusional hallucination, because there are two other people that were present. At least one of them was present from the ceremony, and present during both the confirmations that the information I had received were true. So, and I'm not saying that needs to prove anything to you. I'm saying for my own purposes, so that I know that I didn't just like develop this delusion or something, you know. I mean, it's still there online, but you know what I mean. It's nice to have confirmation and witnesses to things when they get that crazy. Um, yeah, you know, and I don't know what to think of all that. Yeah, the Illuminatis Trilogy is amazing. Also, from Robert Anton Wilson. Um, no, Enrica didn't mind giving breast milk up for the bat. It was her idea. Um, just randomly, that just comes out. I'll explain for those of you that aren't aware in a second. Um, Also, while we're talking about Robert Anton Wilson, Prometheus Rising is essential reading for any serious student of modern adeptship and the mysteries. Um, Robert Anton Wilson, one of the things that is so wonderful about him is that he probably went deeper into ritual magic and Crowley's writings and the Western occult traditions in general, while also having Ivy League level education in physics, mathematics, psychology. So he really is sort of unique in the sense that he has the occult experience, tremendous amount of psychedelic drug experience, and then you know also the scientific training to actually make coherent models that represent all of this stuff. And he also never really lost his sense of skepticism that I think is really so essential in the development of a coherent metaphysics. Um, you know, and it's also the thing I think that is the most lacking in like the modern sort of I don't want to call it a spiritual community, but in the pop culture, not pop culture, but what is it? You know, conventional spirituality. Um, Not conventional. That's the word when a group of people all at the same time. Uh, Starts with a C. You guys know what I mean. That's what we're missing the most. Is people that actually have skepticism and solid critical thinking skills and are willing to be objective about their own beliefs. This is extremely scary and difficult for people because you fall in love with ideas and you want to believe them. They might be comforting, or they might hold some promise of you know future splendor and wonderment or whatever. But you really have to be willing to strive for objectivity and fearlessness on this quest for truth. So the question about the bat, we found a baby bat. My son found a baby bat in the front yard with a broken wing today, and I, he was just asking if it was difficult to convince my partner to give up some, but it's just a tiny bit of milk. It's a very small bat. I mean, you saw the picture. I'm assuming it's only this big, so it doesn't eat very much. It's cool though. It figured out when we found it, it was pretty much dead, barely breathing, not moving at all. I think it had been cooking out in the jungle sun because it was just in our backyard in the grass and there's no tree cover. So it was just frying in the backyard. And my son found it, and I thought for sure it was going to die. It was barely moving, and so first we took a little bit of salt water and it kind of moved a little bit after it got some in its mouth, and then the breast milk, and then after maybe 30 minutes, it actually started to move and breathe a little bit deeper. And the second time I went to pick it up, it had figured out that when I grab it by the scruff of the neck, we're going to feed it. So it opens its mouth, and now we can put the dropper in and feed it. I really didn't think it was going to make it, so it was really cool when it came back to life. So, you guys have any more questions for me? It's been about an hour. We do have a big lag, so I'll give it a few minutes to catch up. Yeah, well, luckily we have a nursing kit around, so when we find random animals, we can nurse them back to life with human breast milk. Uh, Convenient thing to have around, I guess. Um, it's actually not as bad as the kittens. The kittens, we found a litter of kittens on the side of the road at the beach a couple of years ago, and she had to wake up, I think, like every 2 hours or less to feed them. And the bat is every 4 hours, so a little bit easier. So Micah says, in regards to modern politics, I feel like we are at a tacky modern rendition of the Star Wars prequel trilogies, and our world is in between the trade negotiations and the Clone Wars. Um, it's it certainly is something to that effect, and the Star Wars movies were kind of tacky in their presentation. If you think about sort of the boneheaded symbolism of the, black and white soldiers and um, but I've always felt that George Lucas did understand the consciousness of Yoda. Sorry, not yoga, but Yoda was clearly based on the Dalai Lama. Right? Listen to the Dalai Lama speak, and then listen to Yoda. It's clearly. I think he's actually admitted that. And this idea that Yoda, as an advanced like Jedi master, was able to levitate rocks, and that the only way to defeat these left hand path black hat imperialists is through the development of consciousness, ultimately. And part of the reason for that is that the weapon that they are really fundamentally using is black magic. And I don't know that that's untrue, because whenever we um, use our consciousness to compel others to act in accordance with our will in such a way that it only serves us to the detriment of the collective, that's black magic. I mean, it doesn't matter even if magic isn't real. So, objectively, it's still, you can compel the particles in the air and order them in such a way that they compel men to kill. That's magic. I mean, pretty much no matter how you slice it. Um, so yeah, guys, it's 11:30. I've been on for an hour. I don't see any more questions coming in the chat. If you can get any questions in before I don't know, a minute or two, because the lag takes a second to catch up. Um, what is this? Have I ever tried Hawaiian baby wood rose seeds? No, but I have tried LSA. Um, Lysergic acid diethylamide tartrate 25 is LSD. LSA is lysergic acid amide. So you have two, what was it, like diethyl, so two ethyl molecules or something. I'm not very good at chemistry, but that's something to that effect. It's barely different, the chemical skeleton. Um, and interestingly, LSD, good night, Misty. LSD was the first time that a chemical was discovered in the laboratory before it was discovered in nature. And LSA and LSD are such close analogs that it counts. Um, Also, while we're on the subject, I think that a lot of people disregard LSD because they think that it's unnatural, regardless of its chemical analog in Hawaiian wood rose and morning glory seeds, which I have tried. And it's the same thing. I'll tell you that story in a second. It's not amazing, but there is an element of it that makes it worthy of discussing. And a good warning for all of you out there. Um, but I think that the prejudice against LSD, because it's not natural, should be disregarded for a couple of reasons. For one thing, the belief that mankind cannot work with nature to create something positive is extremely toxic. We might as well just all kill ourselves right now if that's really what people think. And so LSD is actually semi-synthetic because you really need the ergot alkaloids isolated from the ergot fungus. It is possible to synthesize the precursor chemicals, but really, almost no one does that probably because it's just easier, a lot easier, to just get some ergot fungus and isolate the alkaloids. So the way it was described to me by an actual LSD chemist, who I have never met or seen in my life, um, was that the chemical skeleton's already there and it has a couple of holes in it and they fill it in, right? So it's semi-synthetic. So it's this collaborative effort between nature and man that actually produce something good. And on top of that, the research has shown that LSD is actually more efficacious than DMT or psilocybin or any of the other psychedelics at catalyzing neurogenesis, and enhancing neuroplasticity. So it actually does the job that the natural psychedelics do, but better. And that is, kind of a major W for LSD. Um, but I also thought that I would point out that ayahuasca is not natural by those standards. Just because the process that is used to create ayahuasca is much more simple, it's still not something that exists in nature. It's not. People have to do stuff to plants and apply heat. Well, you can cold, but you know what I mean? It's not. Totally, it doesn't exist in nature. Man creates ayahuasca. So if you're gonna hate on LSD because man created it, gotta hate on ayahuasca as well. Sorry, hippie. Um, so there's that. But LSA is very, very similar to LSD, except it's a lot more toxic, and so it causes nausea and headache and maybe a hangover, and it's extremely difficult to what is the word, titrate the doses. That's the medical language. I'm It's too late, but to measure the doses exactly is very difficult. And several people that I knew in high school and in my early 20s that tried it, it was the end of their psychedelic career because it was so strong that they just never ever wanted to take another psychedelic again, no matter what. Um, and I actually did take the Heavenly Blue um, seeds once, but I bought them at Walmart. So I was a little bit. We washed them real thoroughly, but I was still concerned about chemicals, pesticides, and so we soaked them and we ate them and we turned blue. We were only tripping a little bit and we turned blue, and I freaked out because I'm thinking, oh my God, there's pesticides on the seeds, and now we're blue and we're gonna die. And it turns out that the dye that makes the flowers blue exists already in the seed, and so it's actually pretty common. And this is why I'm telling you this. So if you do eat the heavenly blue seeds and you turn blue, don't freak out. You're fine. I think also the nausea that's caused and the headache and the blurred vision and stuff, you're really feeling poisoned, and then you turn blue and you're like, oh my God, we're fucking dying. And in reality, you're just dyed blue temporarily, and you'll return to your normal color after maybe 4 to 6 hours. Not really a problem. Uh, and so I had the psychedelics encyclopedia in the bedroom, and I think I've read something about this before, so I ran in there and got the psychedelics encyclopedia and flipped it open to Heavenly Blue Morning Glories, and it said, don't worry if you turn blue, it's just the dye in the seeds. You're not going to die. And so that was a great relief. Yeah, it scared me pretty good. Especially, if we had been tripping like really, really hard and then we turned blue, I'm sure that would have sucked a lot. By the way, you guys, music live stream tomorrow. Best sound quality so far. I'm working on the music constantly, so these streams are going to get better and better and better. So please do join me for those. support the channel. It really is difficult to justify continuing it sometimes when I look at how many hours go into it versus the yield. So it's, you know, and I honestly, I almost feel obligated because enough people contact me and say something dramatic like it, you know, this channel saved my life. Even I've heard that a few times, or it's really helped me, or, you know, things to that effect. So, you know, for those people that it really, I've made videos that really have helped people, I almost feel obligated to continue doing it. But then again, maybe I've already made the videos that, you know, and I don't want to talk about this too much, but usually part of the reason for creating a YouTube channel is that it's passive income, because after a while it's monetized, and then you can just, like, you put all the videos that you need to have there, and then you move on with your life, and then it just continues to make a little bit of money over time. Because we're demonetized, this channel will never do that. So I'm basically like, just if I ever stop doing this, it's just nothing. It's just nothing. It's just like, I mean, it's great that it's there, but you know what I mean? It's never going to, um, it's never going to be a source of passive income or anything. So, I'm trying to figure out what is the best course of action for me to continue doing this and actually justify the time that I put into it. And actually to put more time into it. I would like to make a lot more videos that are actually videos and not just live streams. But it's really time consuming. I had to, our Adobe Premiere subscription ran out. I can't justify spending money on things that I only use for YouTube. Camera's frozen. For example, so I had to download a new editing program and spend a bunch of time learning that, you know what I mean? It's really time consuming. So anyways, enough complaining. What kind of videos would you make? Vinny, well, if you go back into my channel, there are videos that are like, you know, the wit and wisdom of Terrence McKenna, and I did one for Timothy Leary, so there's like, you know, psychedelic visuals with quotes from these people and different music playing. You know, I've made quite a few actual videos, but I've kind of stopped doing it once we got demonetized, and after 2020, when I said things that a lot of people didn't like politically, and I lost a lot of my patrons, we've just never really gotten the momentum back to where I can justify spending 30, 40 hours a week editing videos. So, you know, we'll see what happens. And like I said, if you weren't dialed in earlier, the problem that I'm having is that because I'm on a list of undesirables, they are suppressing your content on all platforms. And also they have detected which devices you're using. So I can't just create another channel and monetize it or whatever. It'll know it's me and deprioritize that as well. Unless I get like a new phone, a new computer, get all new gear. Yeah, explanations of rituals, how to make different, you know, psychedelic brews and stuff. Yeah, but like I said, you know, I'm not rich, and I have a lot to do, so I have to be able to justify the time that I invest. I don't know. I had one idea that maybe I could contact some companies and then put, like, you know, you can actually edit in commercials instead of having YouTube, and then maybe that would, you know, justify. Anyways, whatever. That's my problem. You guys don't. I mean, maybe I should tell you about it so you can help me think of a way to monetize the demonetized channel and make it worthwhile, a little bit more worthwhile. Okay, so I'm clearly rambling about nothing. It's almost midnight, so and my phone is almost dead. So I appreciate you guys so much for watching, spending this time with me. Hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us via all of the different options that are available in the chat in the description. And I will see you tomorrow night with electric guitars.